Episode 239, The Long Listen with Philip Weiss on the ZNL podcast.
The primitive forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful.
AI is a golden opportunity.
How do we ensure that this technology is regulated?
The long arc of technological history is now in an extraordinary new phase.
The AI6 podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
I recently joined Philip on the ZNL podcast. They are a digital marketing agency based in the heart of Brussels, and I've known this team for quite a number of years. And let me tell you, we spoke for over 3/4 of an hour, and Philip's questions to me, because I was in the hot seat, were brilliant. And he got me to think about things that perhaps I hadn't think about before. And I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that you do too. So this is Joanne Sweeney in conversation with Philip Weiss on the ZNL podcast.
Hello and welcome to this edition of ZNL. I am delighted to have a very special guest today, Joanne Sweeney. She's an experienced communicator. She has extensive knowledge of communication in the private, public sector, journalism, radio, which I love, and more recently, AI. So Joanne, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great, and thank you so much for inviting me onto your great podcast.
Well, we're very, very happy to have you here. And I'm really excited because this is a very special moment. I guess for you, you have published a book called The AI Playbook, The Strategic Guide to AI for Marketing and Communications. A very, very ambitious title. I am reading through it, but I would love to hear, what motivated you to write a book on such a kind of complex and changing topic. So tell us a little bit about the backstory. Why did you write the book?
Well, Philip, I guess as a marketing and comms professional, and many of your audience are also in our profession, you could ask the question, where were you when you learned about ChatGPT in November 2022? And I was sitting in my office here in the west of Ireland. And as much as I was excited, I got this momentary lightning bolt thought in my brain going, oh my God, your industry and your business has literally just been disrupted. And that was the moment that I had to look inwards and ask myself, so what are you going to do about it? And I felt this disruption, as you will also have felt the disruption in our industry. You mentioned that I started my career in journalism and in broadcast journalism, in particular on radio. When I went to university, I was taught shorthand and touch typing and broadcasting. Some of those skills I still use today. The shorthand, definitely not. And so I felt that once again, from traditional journalism to digital marketing, digital comms, now we had AI in the playing field. And this was a big player and a Goliath of sorts, bigger than the internet itself. And so I asked myself for months after November 2022, what value are you bringing in the AI age, Joanne? And having previously written 3 books around, policing and social media, and then government comms in the digital age, the penny kind of dropped and said, oh, is it time for another book? I mean, the last one was, Public Sector Marketing Pro, the revised edition for a post-pandemic age. I mean, that was huge disruption. I did not think that 3 years on, I'd have to write a book on AI. And I did, Philip. I felt I had to. And the reason that I write the books, yes, it's for an audience. Yes, it's for positioning. But more than that, it's about me having to immerse myself in a topic. And so that's November 2022. The book was only published September 2025. So just under 3 years. And so I made that conscious decision to immerse myself in research, in practice, and then beginning to teach other comms professionals what I knew, knowing that we were all starting at zero. Like, I was listening to a podcast this morning and the guy goes, is anyone really an expert in agentic AI? Because guess what? Yep. It's just knew. And so, we had an off mic conversation before we started recording, and there's a danger in writing a book about AI, right? Like, what longevity does it have? I don't mention Atlas in it, of course, because it wasn't an AI first browser. But what the promise of the book is it gives you the fundamentals of what AI is, why it matters, how we should be applying it, and then the good governance, ethical and policy ambitions that we should be creating and setting up in terms of creating guardrails for AI. Because I knew that was the first question that I would get in doing any podcasts or any media interviews, like, is this book still relevant? And so literacy for me is very important. And I love having conversations about AI, but I need my clients and my students to be fully AI literate, because I make the case in the book that AI is communications. It's not coding, because we're communicating with the technology. We're communicating with our stakeholders, whether it's influencing internally in terms of saying, hey, here's how we adopt AI, here's why we need to do it. Or if it's also communicating to our audiences, whether it's citizen or customer, that we are in fact using AI in our customer service, in our content, or in our product development. So the book drops people in on the very first page, as you will have read, into the University of Galway, into my journalism class. And it's 25 years exactly since I studied journalism in the university. And it was a moment of, I can actually draw and close this circle and remind people that even if you trained like me 25 years ago, you're still relevant today. And the message was, I learned shorthand and touch typing. The shorthand is not relevant, but now I have assistance and I'm dabbling and working in AI. And they're the new skills that communicators need. And I really want people to feel that they're relevant and that they're secure. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But the book was born when Sam Altman took to that stage in San Francisco, and it was born in the knowing if I didn't move, I'd be moved off the pitch and my relevancy would be really questioned by my clients. So call it fear or call it ambition or inspiration. Maybe it's all of the above.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fantastic exercise. And I feel what you're saying is it's a learning journey for yourself that you're sharing with other people, which I think is, really the best that the writing exercise can do, is to structure your thoughts, share that, and of course learn along the way. Now, as we said, there are lots of new tools coming online all the time. In fact, in your last podcast, you talked about vibe coding, which has been around, but it's I think it's still something that's pretty misunderstood, and people can do experiments, but they don't know exactly how far they can take those experiments and how well this can work. But what I'd like to ask you is, in your own background, you mentioned it, so journalism, communication, etc. But I'd like to know a little bit about how technical you are. How much do you know about the kind of mechanics of how these tools work? And I also know you mentioned just before off camera that you were also building your own LLMs, so large language models, on a local thing. Now, does that take a lot of skills? So I'm trying to get the question, how technically savvy do your the readers and the users have to be in your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it has a two-part answer. So for the reader and the book, I've deliberately written it in an accessible way, so you can have zero knowledge about AI, pick up the book, and by the end of it, the promise is that you are AI literate. I also invite the reader to complete some tasks along with me. So you're reading and then you're learning by doing, because like anything, everything is academic until you put it into practice. Now, I would have to say that I maybe have more technical skills than the reader. If I bring you back to my first job working in a radio station in the northwest of Ireland, my job was to keep the website updated. And 20 years ago, we were using Dreamweaver.
Okay.
where the older members of the news team kind of thought, well, the young person could do it. So I was embracing that digital element of comms right back then, and then building websites, but I always had a tech team. So I've always had a graphic designer who is competent in those technical skills. I've always had web developers who are competent in those skills, but I've always been the communicator. I knew what I wanted. I knew how to brief the people. I knew how to test it, and I knew the user flow and the user experience. Now, in the AI age, my skill sets are absolutely using AI tools, testing them to their limits, building. But again, I have an AI developer on my team. And so I'm bringing in that skill set that understands, security, red teaming, trying to break your bot. So I think that we still need that technical assistance. Yes, you can do it, but your journey is going to be slower and I think more frustrated. And that's why I keep going back to AI is communications, not coding, because I use Claude to code my infographics now, right? And to create visual representations of my monthly campaign reports for my clients. Heretofore, we would have been designing that potentially and doing a design brief, but now I can get it coded by Claude by briefing it with words and having conversations. So yes, I have technical skills, but I still lean on the competency and the lifelong experience of those people whose first skill is maybe web development or graphic design. And I think it's complementary. So we're building currently AIJ. So AIJ is more than an assistant. She's actually me. It's the AI version of me, AI, and J stands for Joanne. Because when I was at Harvard this summer, and with all these other minds and the professors in Harvard being so generous with their information, I really, as we like to say in Ireland, I milked the week. I got the most out of it by asking lots of questions and asking questions of the 73 others from around the world who were on that program. But one of the big takeaways was the people who are going to succeed and who can succeed very quickly in the AI age are domain specialists, because the large language models are generalists, right? They can spit things out, but it's quite generalized. But you and I, Philip, who are lifelong comms people, and we've seen our industry evolve, we've been in the trenches, we've done the work. We can walk into any room and instinctively feel where a client might be and where their bias might be in terms of a comms project or in terms of their goals. And we know that just like a bot might know it. But what we have is domain specialism. So I, work with government and public sector, and the radio sector as two niches. And so what I'm doing is building out AIJ to be able to think, act, and do just like I have based on my experience. So training her with all of my knowledge. So it's called a corpus. That's the technical word in AI. The corpus is the body of knowledge that you feed and you train the AI assistant in. And it uses RAG, so that retrieval augmented generation, RAG. And that's it. You're training the bot to become knowledgeable in what you have. So I give it my podcasts. I give it all my books. I give it all my trainings. I give it all the work that I've done for clients, and it's built on a local server. So it's a domain-specific large language model. The technology behind it, we're actually using Llama from Meta.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's open source. And so I've got a tech team building that. I know what I wanted to do. Basically, I want to license it to customers where they can have me on their team. It will have no access to the internet or to Meta AI or to ChatGPT. And I'm deliberate about that because obviously and we know this, if we're selling consultancy, we have to be insured if we give bad advice, right? And if somebody's using my tool, I want it to be trained on my knowledge that I am confident in and that I've given and that I've got feedback on it. Then I will give it to a test user base, and they will be asked to use it for a couple of weeks at work as their assistant. and give me feedback. So I'll have a set of questions. And, as assistants are trained, also our own large language models can be trained in that. The more they're used, the more feedback they get, the more intelligent and customized they become. So lots of tech behind it. Also the security aspect, how safe is this? Can I hand it over and give it to somebody to use on a local server? So all of those considerations. And then there's the legal aspect. So we're in Europe, right? You're in Brussels, in the heart of it. And we have to comply with the EU AI Act. So then I've got a legal representative, a media lawyer, who then has to look at the product and to make sure that I'm fully transparent on what I'm doing and that I'm fully compliant on the risk-based laws. And because it's for a government audience, you will appreciate that they need extra rigor before using something like this. So it makes me nervous. Let's say it hasn't gone to the market yet for testing, but it soon will be. And so the tech will be built using open source, but then, Amazon Web Services hosted there. So there's a lot of technicalities that you need in order to deliver something like this. I guess I bring the industry knowledge, the product knowledge, the domain knowledge, and then how I want it to look and feel. So what I would say is don't be afraid to have an AI technical expert on your team to collaborate with you. And I would imagine lots of testing before release. And the same will go with creating a custom GPT, right? They're brilliant, but you need to test. And the advice in the book is use case, use case, use case. You can have policy, you can have, all the tools, but if you don't have an established use case, which demonstrates why we're using AI, how we're using AI, and then the results it gives us, and we can prove value, then you're really still not doing it in the right way. And so I'm doing that for myself in the first instance, going up to agentic, but with clients, I would say they're very early doors in terms of literacy and tools and maybe custom assistance.
Yeah, I think your point about use case is very, very useful, and I think a very good piece of advice in the sense that, and I think that's one of the challenges with AI, which is the probabilistic environment in which we live, because we can set up a use case. Okay, let's do this prompt and this thing to find out this outcome, and you run the same thing. I'm doing these tests all the time, and literally sometimes 2 days later, it's like, okay, wait a minute, that's not what I just did before with the same prompt. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it different? And so there's this kind of unpredictability, which I think is very destabilizing, because it's not code which gives you a predictable outcome. It gives you a probabilistic outcome. So I think we constantly need to be experimenting with the tools to see what results they give and kind of to go back to that. I think what you said about the expert is also very interesting. Obviously, we have a team of designers and of people who have technical skills, etc. And so you're kind of constantly saying, well, if I do this prompt, will it give me a result that if I ask somebody to design the thing, I will, it'll take me 3 hours because I have to brief and wait and all that. And if the prompt gives a thing, and I find that you kind of, sometimes it's like, oh my God, I just did in 3 minutes what would have taken me 2 hours. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, I keep having to try the same prompt to get, because the image is not what I want and I can't get rid of that thing. And the designer would then take 5 minutes to do it. So there's this very interesting balance, I think, between prediction and basically probabilistic results. And so I'm wondering, when you apply this, and when you see this being applied with your clients, what would you say is working really well? What are the low-hanging fruits of AI implementation, and what are the big challenges that people might not be aware of? Because let's be honest, everybody wants to talk about AI. A lot of people want to have these workshops, but whether that means they're going to start really implementing that's the big question. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of text, copy, formatting, AI can really excel at that. Now, as you just shared, starting with a prompt and getting a different result every time can be very frustrating. So where my clients are going is creating their own custom AI assistants, whether it's in Copilot or in ChatGPT, and they're using their own like brand voice, tone of voice guidelines, brand guidelines, and they're able to review multiples of content from across like public sector. Let's say they've 7 or 8 offices nationwide, and they've got teams writing copy, creating graphics, and their job is quality assurance, right? So what you can do then is create this assistant that actually will not only guide you in maintaining brand standards, but also for somebody who's doing that quality control, they can run it through the assistant and they can identify very, very quickly where people are dropping the ball. So you've got to start with those highly time-consuming, laborious, repetitive tasks that have a defined set of parameters, that have rules. The large language models and assistants, they love rules. If there's any scope for deviation or nuance or not understanding context, that's where that probability, it's maths at the end of the day behind all of this AI, can't come and deliver the same thing consistently. So creating custom assistants that have a particular skill. So the error that I see people making is asking the assistant to do too much. And then it gets confused on itself. We've all been there in this thread of conversation that's going on for 10 minutes. And at the back of your head, you're going, I actually could have done this myself, right? It's like an assistant that's new and you have to be patient to train them. So give an assistant a very small number of tasks to do. Keep it really simple. Give them the guidance, give them your standard operating procedure, tell them what they should do. And I think another thing that I see people doing incorrectly and not knowing that it's incorrect is they don't tell the assistant what they shouldn't do. That's equally important, because if you don't guide them on what they shouldn't do, then they're going to be making errors based on not knowing what those boundaries are. So text, copy, formatting, planning, strategy, but also what I see it being used for as a really good use case is data analytics. So having Code Interpreter now plugged in to these large language models where they have a really good mathematical and computational brain power in the supercomputers, because we do a lot on numbers, right? We're not accountants, but every action leaves a reaction on the social web. And so we have numbers, we've got metrics. So providing insight on data is really good. And what I'm saying to people is get all your data sets in one place, gather them together. And because we can read web, we can read CRM, we can read email, we can read social, we can read form data, video data. And sometimes we're not very good at that. We say we do look at the data, but do we forensically investigate it? And I think this is where AI can really be an aid. Have a look at my last 30 days. Here are my 25 data points. Here were my goals. Where are the gaps? So as another brain at a strategic level, and if you're a small team or a small comms team and you don't have that other strategic brain, you maybe have junior assistants who are very operationally minded and not strategic, you can push that to the limit. But again, the brief needs to be really specific and it needs to be very detailed. So I would say more is better to get a better result. When it comes to image generation and video generation, yes, we've got VO3 from Google. Now we've got Sora 2. And they can create longer videos. Initially, it was 8 seconds in terms of Gen AI because of the number of tokens that it takes, the capacity of the GPUs to turn out visual and video content. That will get better. I still don't think it's there yet in terms of clients using it to create a bank of visual assets to produce. I think where AI currently is now, where we can use it, is in video editing. Like, we're using StreamYard here. I use Riverside for my podcast. It will make magic clips for me in seconds. Opus Clip in terms of repurposing long form to short form, editing out your ums and your ahs, not just in the subtitles, but also in the video. Conversational editing is also coming. So I think there are still gaps. And so I think our expectation of AI maybe needs to be tempered by what we can achieve in practice. So start with what AI can do well, embed it into your standard operating procedures, and scale it across the organization. Because, as you rightly say, there's hype and then there's reality, and we've got to find our feet somewhere in between.
Yeah, I think it's. I like your point about the brain. For me, actually, the examples that I've seen that work really well. The simplest one actually is just the meeting notes. And if you're doing meetings on Teams, what's interesting is that it was quite clunky at the beginning, so it wasn't actually really doing very good notes. And then suddenly it started to get much better, and then it's kind of like, okay, now this is good enough, and I can take my notes. And then the second thing, which we're observing, because we're using the Microsoft 365 environment, and have been using SharePoint for the last 10, 15 years. So we have all this data. And what I really find more and more interesting, and it's getting better, is when I say, okay, I have a client in sustainability. Can you just check some of our research, strategic work, give me some case studies and some recommendations and this and that. And then you can say, and by the way, check my latest emails, also my Teams chat and the recording of the meeting. All of this data in this environment is already kind of organized, and it's getting better. I mean, it's really interesting how a few months ago it wasn't great. Now GPT-5 is there. It's starting to become useful. So I feel that this is where the organizations, and for associations, I think it's incredible, because a small team can start getting access to the knowledge of other people. So it's very interesting. And then for me, one of my favorite functions is deep research, which I think really works extremely well for, again, certain things. You have to check everything because you can't rely on it, but it's like it can do the work of which would take you weeks or at least days in the past. But I think you mentioned hype, and I'm not sure where this is coming from, but I feel that, especially in Brussels and the EU, there is a marketing on LinkedIn and things like that. People saying, hey, here are my 5 prompts that will change your life, get you 1 million leads, do the perfect thing. And when you do it, in good faith, you go like, okay, I'm going to start doing this. Like, well, that's not exactly right. And then you realize, no, it's kind of wrong. And so the hype I feel around AI is doing us all a disservice, because it's not really acknowledging the complexity. So what's been your experience of people saying, okay, change my life, use the magic of AI to make us grow tenfold in 5 minutes? How do you cope with that in conversations with people? Because I get this a lot. People saying, okay, let's do AI. Let's have a workshop. It's like, why? I don't know. Let's just do it. So how do you set the expectation?
It's so true. And honestly, I think that the hype is being driven by the market. And I'm talking about the economic market at the first instance. Like, we've seen NVIDIA now pass, 5 trillion now? I think I had on my podcast 4 trillion like about 2 months ago. And I'm going, oh,
I don't know how.
It's already out of date. It's already out of date. So the market, and we can count on both hands who the major players in AI globally are. So they're driving the hype. That's my opinion. They're driving the hype. They're driving the market value. The nation states are putting in the legislation. They're putting their money where their mouth is. The governments are putting money into AI. And when you see governments putting money into AI, then we all need to get on board. Bringing it back to real life and the day-to-day operations of any organization or association, or indeed government departments, they're very nascent, Philip. They're very, very nascent. I don't think the literacy is there. I think there's still a lot of fear, and that fear comes from a lack of understanding. I think the mindsets are a bit different. Some have the fear of missing out. So that enthusiasm, don't know what we want to do, but we want to do AI. Then you have the fear of messing up. I see a lot of that. I see a lot of comms and marketing professionals who would be my kind of target audience who are like, Joanne, I just don't want to get it wrong. So rather than getting it wrong, I'm just going to do nothing until my organization leads. Whereas I'm saying comms and marketing are the perfect department to start AI acceleration within it, because it can do our work and we can create the use cases. So I think they're nascent. I think what's going to happen is individual sectors are going to see leaders and they're going to emulate what they're doing. So I work in the radio sector, the commercial radio sector, and I've said to them, you need to create the standard because you all have the same job. If you're in Dublin, Galway, Cork, or if you're in Athens, you're all doing the same thing. Producing great radio has a set of standards and a set of processes, but the industry needs to decide how you use AI. Can we clone voices for news? You know what I mean? Can we use AI voices for ad scripts? You've got to decide, not the government. So I think we're going to see the organization of industry bodies, and I think that's what they should be doing, because you have a collective. Okay, some might be competing, but collectively they want to set a standard. Just like when the internet was created, didn't they all come together, the major players, and say, here's the HTTPS standard for the internet and we'll all comply? So I think that's how we're going to see sectors organized. Some will lead, then that will create case studies and people will emulate, and they'll be second movers. They don't want to be first movers. Other things that I see happening is lots of money being given for training. So training, but this needs to be training plus practice. It needs to be training plus practice. You need to have a use case at the end, and you need to have that team. They will be literate at the end if they practice it, but also explainability, being able to explain why they applied AI, how they applied AI, and what has been the measurable value. And also they need to talk about risk, ethics, and governance. And so I guess that's what I put in the book. I kind of put all the ingredients in there that you need to cover to do AI well. The technology is always going to evolve. But I think we're at lower stage tools. People are using the tools. Then we have assistants, so creating your custom assistants. And then we're going into agentic AI. So I think those three levels where we should be going. I think most people are at tools, some are at assistants, and agentic AI, if it gets better for us, maybe we'll be there. We have embedded case studies in 12 months.
Yeah, I think agentic AI has been this very exciting thing. I've been testing it every single time. So from the agent on ChatGPT to the agent in the Atlas browser, and it keeps frustrating me because I'm giving it instructions. I'm going to come on 5 times, and then you break. It's like I can do that. So you feel like I'm not there in an efficient kind of agentic flow. But I think what we do, I assume that it's going to start working properly, in the coming upgrade cycles. But then I think there's this AI workflow creation, which for companies and organizations, that's going to be, I think, a game changer. So combining agents, prompts, and all that inside a workflow that you can say, okay, now I need to, I've got a client saying this, do the research, create the brief, make the analysis, do this, and you end up with a full kind of proposal with content, with analysis and all that. But it doesn't quite work yet because you kind of need to struggle to get every step of the way. But I've seen interesting cases of this work. Now, this brings me to the question that, keeps being discussed. And this week, we heard Amazon firing 30,000 people. We're hearing stories everywhere about, consultancies also saying we're going to fire lots of people because, ChatGPT can get you a McKinsey presentation with the whole strategy, and with a deep research, you get something that looks pretty credible. So in your mind, who is going to be replaced by AI and when?
Well, those of us who have tasks that are repeatable, that are manual, that are laborious and tedious, at a very low level. I mean, think about it. Marketers, comms, they talk about accountants and lawyers, knowledge workers. So knowledge workers are definitely that group who are called out because the supercomputer brains, knowledge is now ubiquitous. It's not in the hands of the few experts. It's in the hands of anyone who wants to research any topic. They might not know whether it's factually correct or whether the large language model is hallucinating, but certainly those of us in knowledge need to be very discerning about how we take our next steps. And we've already spoken about why I've taken steps into AI. Then you have workers whose job involves using software, right? So we look in the health sector and we have radiologists who are reading scans, reading x-rays, and we have a margin of error. There's always a margin of error in work like that. But then if we see that the technology can outperform the human in terms of doing analysis of data sets, whether they're visual or numerical, we will then, maybe our roles will be augmented, maybe not replaced or displaced, but maybe our role will be augmented to now being overseeing the role of a domain specialist assistant or a suite of tasks being completed by agentic AI. And again, I would love people to argue otherwise with me. Part of me feels at the age of 47 and having over 20 years in this industry that I'm kind of safe, because if we're going to manage agents, you want somebody who's got core knowledge and competency, nuance and context to actually manage the bots. So I'll be boss, but I might be managing bots, because in the law, the accountability does not stop with the bot. It stops with a human being. And so I think of displacement, and I do worry about young people. I worry about graduates. I think they are being directly affected. I think middle management is being directly affected, because middle managers are managing lots of people. But can that be done away with? Because guess what? Now we've got software to augment the role of people who should be self-managing and delivering it a more productive and efficient way. And we don't need a human to manage them. We can actually have transparency on their delivery because of that technology. So I think entry level, a generic manager might have an issue. I really think the takeaway here is domain specialism, plus you and I leaning into technology, being literate and having the competent skills. And honestly, Philip, I'm a words person, I'm a communicator. I'm not tech first. I've had to use technology, but don't be afraid of it. The UX and the UI of all of these platforms is exactly the same. You look at ChatGPT, Grok, Copilot. Why do they all look the same? Because they need mass use. They're making it really easy because they need all of us to be using this technology to validate the value that they're putting on this technology on the open markets, So yeah, long answer to your question, but I do worry about entry level, middle managers, knowledge workers. If you combine your knowledge with AI, I think you're safe. If you're ignoring it, ignore it at your peril.
Yeah, I'm really curious I wonder if, 5 years from now, if we look back at this conversation, this moment, will we see, oh, look at that, these whole company ranges have disappeared now. People are doing everything. There's no longer, maybe there's an AI master of the bots or whatever new titles they'll come up with. Or will we just have a similar kind of world of, McKinsey's and communicators just, using tools a bit more like we're using the web and emails and all that, and everybody uses it. And it's not this spectacular transformation. So I'm really curious whether, obviously it's a prediction that we have to do. I want to come back to your point about domain expertise. I don't know if you know the book by David Epstein called Range, which basically talks about the fact that you can be a generalist or a specialist. So the whole conversation is basically, what should you be in today's world? And actually, I think there's another book which kind of goes the other way. So he's basically saying it's better to be a generalist in the sense that having different experiences and different perspectives of the world allows you to be more flexible, to learn faster, to kind of not get stuck in one single area, which is a big change from, the previous messages like, go deep and have your PhD in, the microbiology of the, special insect in this one region of the world. Because that information will be accessible by AI. So I'm just wondering, don't you think that the mindset, i.e., if you take a subject at university, philosophy, which I'm biased because that's one of the subjects I studied, but I mean, it teaches you how to think, and if you can think, then you can frame the question that you have for your AI without knowing the answer, but by trying to guide it in certain ways. So isn't the domain expertise going to be accessible through the tools? And what you really need is that clarity, that structure, that thinking.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I do hear commentators saying it. So a couple of points there. I also did philosophy for a year when I was doing English and politics. So that critical thinking is really important with AI. On the generalist idea of, knowledge is ubiquitous, AI has it, so what's the point? One of the arguments they made at Harvard was that because content is just so freely available, what the value comes from those who actually have deep and original knowledge that can keep producing new knowledge. So that was their argument. Some companies are actually buying up smaller companies or hiring people for large sums of money. Even content creators will have a new space, because originality is what's going to continue to feed large language models. It's going to evolve as society, and society's thinking evolves as our behaviors are now changing. So I get the generalist, and I think for maybe that's the main population body. You know what I mean? If you want to survive in an AI world, you got to be agile enough to be able to pivot to what your organization needs, so that you're not just pigeonholed into this little office. So I get that completely. I guess I'm thinking more strategically about where I'm going, bringing my company, bringing my knowledge, and where my value is. So I'll be staying firmly in my domain specialism, but I am embracing the technology and having, the phrase in the book is AI plus me is better. So we bring something extra to the table, not just AI on its own, not just me on its own. I'm bringing all of it, and I can use my critical thinking and my lived experience to shape where we go. Because I fear, Philip, I really fear that there are decisions being made in boardrooms, and especially within our government and public sector, by people who don't understand the science of AI and who are maybe taking personal bias or a fear-based approach into it. And that is dictating how then they proceed with it. And then the other one is, in 5 years' time, let's listen back in 5 years just for the crack of it to see how far off we were. But I'm already feeling that, what about Google? Is Google one of these companies that might not be Google as we know it? You know what I mean? Yeah. Google search. I mean, we've gone to ChatGPT or Perplexity for our search. Now with OpenAI introducing Atlas and saying, hey, download that, make it your primary browser. And they have created, one of the first, if not the first, AI native browsers. So, and Google's whole business model has been completely disrupted. I was a trainer for Google for 8 years, and we were training the Google way in digital marketing, and that office shut down 2 years ago. So they were not providing that as a added value service to their customers because they seen what was coming. And the other point that I would make, and the last one on this, is what we see, Philip, in terms of what those big companies are giving us, OpenAI, Anthropic, Grok, Meta, what they are giving us is the tip of the iceberg of what they see. They're giving us agentic AI that's a little bit broken, but actually they don't care because they need the masses to embrace it, to make it mainstream. And there's this TikTok, and I played it on one of my podcasts months ago, and it just kind of framed everything for me. And it is, the bots didn't take over. You give us all the permission. The humans are giving the technology all of the permission because guess what? We're lazy. Inherently, we want to do things faster in less time. If there's a shortcut that's approved by our bosses, yeah, we'll take it. So we're giving all of our autonomy and knowledge to this technology. There's about 10 or less companies in the world controlling it. And I've no idea where we'll be, only to say they know where it's going a lot more than little old minion me sitting here in the west of Ireland. But for sure, we will be way off if we listen back to this podcast in 5 years' time.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's this accelerant piece where, you know, the right use of AI, so using AI in a smart way, can really multiply your capabilities on specific tasks. I think that's something that we're seeing, and you know, that was coming back to my domain expertise questions. Like, if you know what you're talking about and you know how to evaluate the answer, because I find, you know, one interesting thing is when you do, I love doing a deep research, but then I have a massive document and I'm going like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to read all of that. And actually, if you don't read it all and check everything, you're going to let some major errors seep through. So I think you need to judge that, and for that you need your instinct. So I think some people in some organizations are able to really exponentially multiply what they can do. They can write analysis, proposal, and all that. They have, you know, better writing, better insights, better data to feed that. But at the same time, indeed, there is, you know, it's very, very hard to predict where all this is heading. And you mentioned fear. So I do want to touch on that side of things, which is also a whole other discussion. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people who talk about AI out of the fear perspective are not even engaging with it, because they think that if they engage with it, they're already, you know, giving their souls away to the future overlords that are about to take over society. Now, there's a practical fear. There was a big discussion before the election season that we just went through about misinformation, bots, and all those terrible things, which didn't really happen. So I'm curious, do you think that this misinformation fear through AI was, you know, exaggerated, or is it just coming slowly? And the bigger question is, I mean, where do you stand on superintelligence is going to destroy the Earth, and what they call the P-doom in Silicon Valley, which is, you know, what's your level of probability that we're all going to die? So first misinformation, and then your kind of superintelligence apocalypse question.
So we've just come out of a presidential campaign here in Ireland, and there was a very exquisite deepfake video released, purported to be from our national broadcaster RTE, and featuring which turned out to be the winning presidential candidate, Catherine Connolly. She's president-elect. And so there were the newscaster, the news host, there was a political correspondent, and there was one of the only two candidates in the race. And it was shockingly realistic. And it went viral because we were all so curious, Philip, as to how real it was. And it made mainstream news that whoever created it, they just got exponentially more clicks and views because of our curiosity. But what that does is it distracts the conversation in the first instance. So it got about 8, 10, 12 hours of coverage. It allowed a particular ideological grouping then to row in, going, it might be fake, but guess what? The sentiment of it, there's a lot of truth in it, okay? And the ability for us to decipher between fake and real, the general Joe public, if we're media literate and we've got a trained eye and ear for this, we might spot idiosyncrasies that the normal person just scrolling on their phone wouldn't. So it's easier to create and easier to scale with deep fake. So using AI to create the likeness of people, because the internet is full of our voices, our faces, podcasts, YouTube videos, social media, and to spread content to serve a particular economic or ideological grouping. And police forces, even Europol operating out of Brussels, would say that the police organizations across Europe are finding it more difficult to combat cyber crime threats because of deep fakes and misinformation. So I think it's going to grow, and maybe people will switch off social because they say, well, I can't trust anyone. I think traditional media need to step up their game. They need to be as exquisite in their visual presentation of their news, and also be media literate. In terms of super general intelligence, Mary Meeker, her report earlier this year on AI, and she's considered the godmother of the internet. When she speaks, everybody listens. She said it could be here within 5 to 10 years, and that's where the bots are more intelligent than us, and they can solve climate change. Maybe is that a good thing? Do we want it because we can save the world and reverse the damage to our oceans? I mean, the European Commission has Mission Ocean, and that's restoring our ocean and waters health by 2030. We're now, 4 years away from that deadline. Can AI help us? What about advances in cancer cures? You know what I mean? We welcome that. Of course we do. So we will vote with our hearts and our minds for the good. But and I know that when it comes to technology, sometimes there are equal people on the side of bad as they are on the side of good. And actually, you don't often need a lot of bad people. But if they're very good at using technology to interfere with health systems, with banking systems, with energy systems, you can take down countries. You can take down continents. And that's what I fear. I fear the cyber warfare of AI. That's what I mean, earlier this summer, we saw that the lights went out in Spain and parts of Portugal. And we're all like, oh my God, what happened? Yeah, the switch went off because I think it was too hot or overheated or something. But the technology exists for things that are far greater. Even in terms of traditional warfare, like drones, we've seen it being used in Europe. And that's what scares me. And then I kind of retreat to growing up, being a farmer's daughter and living by the coast in the 1980s in rural Ireland. If you look to the left, you could see New York, and it's like one of the safest places to live. So I do have a lot of fear. And I think this is why we need to train more people in AI to counteract the brains that have nefarious intent. And so I think that's where the urgency is. The urgency is in protectionism and safeguarding democracy, the rule of law, and the integrity, using the technology for reasons that are for good. So yeah, I feel a bit depressed now after that.
Well, my prediction is that I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see at least one AI cataclysmic event, which will be, something that shows us really what bad things AI can do at scale. And from that, people will say, oh my God, this is worse than what we thought. They're going to take a lot of actions and all that. Not much then will happen, and then it will carry on. But at least we'll know, things can really go back, whether it's a massive kind of, shutdown of things even more critical than what we thought possible. But I think until that happens, I think people will think it's a theory, and I think the event will happen because I don't think we'll take action beforehand. But on a brighter note, when you meet students who come up to you and say, well, with all these changes, what are the things that you think I should do? Do I drop out of college and just go straight and create an AI startup? Do I go into deep domain expertise? I normally address that question to the communication world. So what are the things that you think a young communicator needs to do today? Learning skills, attitudes?
Yeah, well, for sure, they need to become AI literate and have competency in the AI tools, the AI assistants, and looking ahead to agentic AI. Because if you can bring that into an organization that maybe is traditionalist in mindset, you will be maybe handpicked from your college course. In terms of education, I'm a huge fan of education. It transformed my life, and I still think it has a place. And in actual fact, we need to reorientate our entire education systems, not only how we teach and deliver and score and exam our students when they have access to these tools, but we also need to be creating brand new disciplines for a world that is going to be AI powered. So actually we need them all to go off to college and university to build our new economies and to create those systems that have great integrity and are in the public interest. So I'd be firm in that, but we need our academic leaders to lead appropriately and not to say no to everything. So when we went to Harvard, again, they were very open with their knowledge, and they said we were told explicitly, take a side on AI and tell your students what they need to do. But also they said they use AI every day in their own work. So if you're not using it, you can't teach it or you can't lead in it. For communications students, yes, you need to have the AI literacy and the skills, but they need to develop critical thinking, emotional intelligence, relationship skills. They're so powerful. I think, Philip, we're going to go back to pre-COVID days and we're going to crave more humanity as these bots and these artificial minds and these artificial conversations that we're having, with our assistants become a little bit more banal and not as empathetic. So skills and softer skills, AI skills and softer skills, I think are key.
Excellent. Okay, so now it's time for the recommendations. So roll jingle.
Recommendations of the week.
So what are your book, podcast, movie recommendations for our viewers and listeners?
I am a huge fan of James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, but his Thursday newsletter, it comes into my inbox about 6 or 7 p.m. and it just gives me joy when I see him come in. It's the 3-2-1 newsletter, 3 ideas from him, 2 from somebody else, and 1 thought of the day. It's packed with gold and it'll take you less than 5 minutes to read, but full of inspiration. An audiobook that I'm listening to at the moment that I think is kind of pertinent for the conversation that we had is from Chrissy Nelson, Slaying the Giant of Fear, because fear creates paralysis and procrastination. And then a cheap plug for my own podcast, AI6, trying to teach people AI in just 6 minutes a day.
Excellent. Well, my recommendation obviously has to be your book, which is the AI Playbook, which, as we discussed, is a great introduction for people to get a frame, to get some steps, to get them thinking on the journey of AI. So thank you so much for being on the show. It's been really, really interesting. I look forward to continuing our conversation online, in person, and who knows, maybe at our next influencer event. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Philip. Bye-bye.